Welcome to the Nightly News Podcast. This is Professor Paul Miller sitting in the Nasir Harris Podcast Studio at the Boyer House at Central Penn College. We are so fortunate today to be joined by the Instruction and Reference Librarian, Samantha Bise. Samantha, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks, I'm happy to be here.
You know, it's funny because you are just celebrating your first full year here at Central Penn College.
Yeah, next week is 1 year.
What were your impressions from your first year here on campus? Is it everything you dreamed of?
It is my favorite place that I've worked ever so far. I really like it. I like the students here. I like faculty and staff. Everybody's so kind, and they want what's best for the students, too.
Well, I think that's awesome, and again, I was so fortunate to be a part of the search committee for your position, and I'm so glad that you accepted the position, and you've just, in your first year here, you've really hit the ground running. You've started so many new initiatives. You've got so much going on that you do outside of the college. I mean, I think it's just fantastic. Do you want to just refresh the memories of the listeners in case they don't recall back to the last time that you were here? What are some of the things that you were involved in the community?
So I am on the board of Perry County Literacy Council. Until recently, I taught math for the Perry County Literacy Council so students could get their GED, so adult learners could get their GED. But then my schedule got crazy, so it doesn't match with anybody right now, but hopefully I do that again soon. I am the vice president of the board of trustees for the Newport Public Library. That's a mouthful. Like 8 months ago, I was helping people do their taxes who either couldn't read or couldn't afford to pay someone. There are other things, or they're not coming to my head. I just look at my calendar each day and show up where I'm supposed to.
Well, I think that's fantastic. And honestly, to me, one of the things that always stuck out with me as far as like when you were going through the whole interview process was that civic engagement that you had. I mean, of course, you've got, the degrees, you have the experience, but and it's funny because I just had this conversation on the previous podcast with Trish Robinson, a community member, and she was talking about the importance of getting involved in our community. And I think it's so important to have people in our college, especially when we require, community service, people that are out there involved in the community. It's one thing for us as a college, as an institution to say, hey, you need to go get involved, but if the instructors, if even the staff aren't doing that themselves, it's kind of unfair for them to make the kids do it if they're not doing the same thing. So one of the things I learned throughout my career is the importance of being involved in our community for a wide variety of different reasons. Obviously, because we're helping the greater good of our community that we are a part of. But certainly as a college student as well, it's definitely going to help them in the long run on their resume, to be able to get out there and network, and to really just have a sense of worth. I mean, when you volunteer with any nonprofit organization, to be honest, you should leave there with a good feeling. And that's part of the reason I think that people do get involved in their communities too.
You start to feel like your community is your family too, and then you get attached to their problems and you want to help fix their problems. So it's hard not to want to do more and more as you start to get involved.
Well, and I think that's interesting too that you mentioned that, because I don't think a lot of times people think about that. They don't necessarily think about what are the issues that are surrounding my local community. There are so many different people out there that need assistance in one way or the other. And you know what? It's kind of our duty as human beings to kind of pay it forward a little bit, because obviously there were people there for us at one point. For us to be that to someone else's, it really is rewarding and frankly makes life worth living.
Yeah, it does.
Well, there's several things that we want to talk about with you here today, Samantha. We want to talk about the newly formed book club. We want to talk about something very special that's happened since you've been last on, the publishing of your book, Dandelions. We're also going to talk about how the library is sort of moving into becoming the center for teaching excellence, and an important announcement about the upcoming colloquium series. And then we'll finish the podcast just talking about some services that the library offers to our students.
Yeah, awesome.
All right, well, first we're going to start talking about the book club. Tell me how this book club got started, because this is the third term for it, correct?
Yeah, this is the third term for it. So from what I understand, there was a book club before, and then it stopped, and I don't remember why, and that was before I got here. If I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong. So we decided to start it back up, and this is the third one. And really, I mean, we have a lot of people on campus who like to read.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, so why not have a book and have those people show up in one spot?
Tell me about a book club. I mean, I've honestly never been to anything quite like this. Can you tell me? So obviously, you're going to pick a book, and in fact, for this term, the end of week 3, you're going to be able to vote on the book. Right now, there are 3 different options, and I'll put links to all of this stuff in the article that accompanies this. And then on March 5th, from 3:30 to 4:30, the book club will meet in the library. So tell me, what is that meeting like?
Well, you talk about the book, obviously. You should be a part of a book club. You're missing out.
Maybe I will.
So you talk about the book, and even if you don't finish it, you still have something to contribute. And it's kind of nice because books are usually about something that has to do with life, and we all have that in common. We all have life. So you start talking about it, and you quickly see that everybody has a different perspective on whatever topics come up, and conversations kind of expand outward, but they're still relevant to the book. So that's nice. Because I think if you're not in a space with people who have different perspectives, that's a problem. And a book conversation is a good way to get those perspectives. So it's a good thing.
Well, and that's what's wonderful about being on a college campus is that we all have different backgrounds. We've all come from different places. So hopefully our ideologies are a little bit different. And that's kind of the point of going to college is so you're exposed to people that aren't from the same background as you, that aren't from the same city as you, that didn't get the same, high school education maybe as you did. So I think that this book club is a wonderful initiative coming from you and the other librarians. Can you talk about some of the previous books that were done, that were a part of the 2 previous book clubs?
Sure. I don't remember what the first one was. I was out of town that week, so I wasn't there. But last term, so we kind of have a theme every single term. Last term was nonfiction, and the book that won the voting was called Dreamland, which is about the opioid epidemic and all that kind of stuff. So that was really interesting. And then last term at the club fair, a lot of people said they like sci-fi. So this term, it's sci-fi books, and those are listed on the Blackboard Library tab under book club.
What's interesting to me is, I talked to you previously, and I talked to my other colleagues about the books I like to read. And I'm typically a nonfiction reader. Honestly, it's been probably about a decade since I've read a fiction book. And I know that sounds crazy. I used to read a lot of Elmore Leonard, who was, he was the writer behind Get Shorty, a lot of other Out of Sight. There were several of his books that were made into films. Then I liked the movies, and then I read the books, and I really loved them. But really, outside of that, over the last decade of my life, I just gravitate toward nonfiction, and I'm not really sure why that is.
I like nonfiction too, for whatever reason, and this is incorrect. It makes me feel like I'm learning more about the world, I'm part of 4 book clubs actually, which forces me to read things that I would never read. And even if I read a book and I really hate it and I have to drag through it, I usually get something out of it. And it's still, it produces these conversations that I wouldn't have had otherwise. So it's a good thing. But that's a good thing is you read things you wouldn't usually read. And sometimes I do like them, like sci-fi. I'm not a sci-fi person. But I read Ender's Game, which is sci-fi, and I thought it sounded awful, but I loved it.
I look back, I taught a class last term called Evolution of Social Media, and one of the projects I had them do was to take a look at, I gave them, there was like 10, 15 movies I had them choose from, and every single one of them was science fiction, but all of the central themes of these movies is how is technology, social media, those types of things, how are they going to impact us moving forward? So a lot of these movies are based in the future. So just, they're considered sci-fi. Anything set in the future is often considered sci-fi. So I guess I'm very interested in sci-fi as well because I gravitate toward a lot of those movies. I wonder what it is about the sci-fi genre that makes students so interested.
Well, sci-fi, I think, usually is apocalyptic in nature. So you talk about the rebuilding of society, you talk about humanity, and that's usually interesting from like an interdisciplinary kind of perspective. So I think it can pull in a lot of different people.
All right. Well, I promise you that I will be a part of the book club this term. I'm actually very much looking forward to it, especially now that again, this will be the first time in a decade that I will be reading a fiction book, which I think is important.
Well, I think people forget that you can listen to audiobooks too, which is what I do a lot now because of time.
Listen, and it's weird because I don't listen to music anymore. I listen to podcasts. So, but I've never listened to an audiobook.
Oh, I listen to them all the time.
I don't know.
Like 3 a week.
I like to have the book. I like to read the book. I like to sometimes make notes in the book. I don't know. I'm gonna be one of those people who is never really gonna go into the ebook craze.
Yeah, I don't like ebooks, but audiobooks, you can like pause it and leave a note in a certain part in your phone too, so that's helpful, but I'm not an ebook person.
And I also just discovered this week the Libby app. Are you familiar with this?
No, I'm not.
So basically, it's an app, and I'm sure there's other apps too. I'm sure you're probably familiar with different ones, but this was just the one that I found. I found a book that I really, really wanted to read. It's called The Four, and it talks about Google and Facebook and their, because of course I'm doing a lot of research about those types of things, and I saw that they had it at my local library in an ebook form, and I'm thinking, okay, well, this is interesting. So I downloaded this app, and you can log in with your library card, and you can rent ebooks that way or borrow ebooks that way, which I thought was really cool. So I actually started reading my first ebook that way.
If you are a resident of Pennsylvania, the Free Library of Philadelphia, because I think they get state funding, which is why we all have access to their stuff too. So you can download ebooks, audiobooks with different apps on your phone. So that's helpful.
Awesome. Well, one thing I did want to talk to while we're talking about books, something very special happened this year for you, and you're very modest about it. If this was me, I would still be telling every single person, hey, guess what? I just published my own book. But you published your own book. It came out September 27th of 2018, and it's called Dandelions. And it is a collection of poetry exploring community issues like addiction, incarceration, homelessness, poverty, mental illness, education, and more. So tell us, I mean, obviously, you said that your background is in writing, technical writing. How did all of this come together with you putting together your own book?
Well, as an undergrad, which is like 10 years ago now, I was an English professional writing major, and I had to take a few creative writing classes, and I was one of those students. I've always been a writer, not always poetry, but I've always written creatively, but I didn't like the classes. I was a technical writing student. I like the boring writing. I like research writing, the academic stuff. But it's probably been like 3 or 4 years of poetry I had over and over again in family members and friends and community members that I would work with. Students at different institutions I've worked at, they all had addiction issues, mental health, education barriers, and all of these things, and they were overlapped. So it started to consume me, so I started to write poetry about it. Somebody found out in my community that I wrote this poetry. They asked me to submit some of them to this local competition, so I did. 2 of my poems won 2nd and 3rd place, so then I had
Congratulations.
to go... Thanks. So I had to go to the award ceremony and read these poems out loud, and then it spiraled. I've just been reading at festivals and things like that. And then usually what happens is somebody will come up to me afterwards and say, oh my gosh, I really related to that, or that really helped me, or I didn't know that we were allowed to talk about these things out in public. I thought that I had to like internalize it. And there is something kind of addicting to that. We're like connecting to somebody else. So I just kept doing it.
What is it about poetry that for a lot of people, it's very approachable? You know, if you sit down and you give somebody a book of, 300 pages with 50 chapters, someone would open the first page and say, man, I don't know if I'm going to read the rest of this book. What is it about the poetry that's so easy and so, I don't want to say basic, because poets are so... there's so much time that goes into it, and it's such a skill, but yet for the reader, it's very approachable. Why do you think that is?
I think because it's short, so it's not as intimidating, and you can get a lot out of it in just a few minutes. I also think poetry a lot of times can operate, a good book can do this too, but it takes longer to digest it. It can operate on a lot of different levels, so no matter where you at, whether you are the homeless person that I was writing about, or you love somebody who is a homeless person, or you have no idea what I'm talking about, you can relate on some level. Because there's metaphors and analogies and all these different things. So even if some of it doesn't work for you, that's all right. It was just 2 or 3 minutes of your time. Move to the next one.
I think that's fascinating. So can you, just for maybe anybody out there who's even maybe considering writing their own book, can you maybe share, I mean, you don't have to say everything, but can you share how so once you had this collection of poems, what was the next step?
So it was years of writing, which strangely enough, I can be a perfectionist and I like things to be just how I like them. But if you are an educator, which I am, and if you're a writer, which I am, those are 2 very messy processes. So I had to let that go and just decide that done is better than perfect. So at one point I just stopped and I put them all in a document. And then I use lulu.com, which is a self-publishing site that I used in college for some of my classes. And I just looked up formatting, and it took me like 2 months. I had to format it. And, things like choosing fonts and that kind of stuff, which seems basic, and you had to create a cover. But it walks you through all of that. I was watching YouTube videos, and then eventually I just hit submit. And then I actually have 2 different editions of this book. The first one, my dad caught 2 typos, and he's so proud of himself. So there were 2 typos because I didn't have an editor.
It's so tough to edit your own work.
Oh my gosh, you get so attached. It's like, what's that saying? If you're in the woods, you can't see the leaves until you walk out there. Somebody says it better than that. But you can't edit your own stuff. It's very hard. So those two errors I had to fix. So I went in, I fixed it, and then this was the second thing. And I haven't found any typos yet, so hopefully, fingers crossed.
What's interesting, too, is you mentioned off air that it's relatively affordable to do this as well.
Yeah, if you buy them in bulk, I have it for sale for $10, and then the money that I make, I donate back to local arts like the Perry County Arts Council and things like that. It's like $1.50 if you buy it in bulk. And for me, bulk was I just bought 50. So the more you buy, the cheaper it is. And I don't have color in my book either besides the cover. So it does get more expensive if you want color images and things, but it's still really affordable compared to other things.
I just think and I just know this from, I've never tried to publish my own book, but just from studying and talking about this in my classes, the publishing industry is, just like everything else, is so consolidated and corporate in this day and age. And I think there's so many local authors that just see such a large barrier to entry and that they don't even bother pursuing this. So I think that just understanding how relatively inexpensive it is to publish your own book, I think that hopefully, if nothing else, if anybody is interested in maybe publishing their own work, to come talk to you, maybe you could give them some pointers.
Yeah, the publishing process took me maybe like 3 months total from the time I had all my poetry done, but I've published just one poem in a collection before, multiple times for different places. That can be a year from the time you submit till they get back to you and you edit it with them and then you see it in print. And there's also something really cool about seeing your own work in your hands.
Explain to me the editing process of a poem, though. Now, I can see an editing process of a longer text, but I mean, poetry is so personal.
Yeah, it's kind of subjective and you get really attached to it. I don't think people realize, well, maybe they do. One poem that's maybe a page or two can take months. It can take a very long time to like tweak it, make it make sense, and you get attached to it, so you have to walk away. But then an editor will come in with fresh eyes, and they'll have their own idea. And sometimes I just say, no, I'm not doing that. That's not what I wanted. Other times it's like, oh yeah, it makes sense. This should go up here. And you know, I started with this rhyme scheme, and then I lost that in the middle, and then I went back to it, and that doesn't really work. So sometimes they have good ideas.
So the next thing that we want to move on and talk about is the Center for Teaching Excellence is going to be put forth by the library from now on. Can you talk to us a little bit about how that change occurred and what the future of the Center for Teaching Excellence is?
Yeah, so the Center for Teaching Excellence, the director is now over in Lancaster working, and we miss her very much. But the library is kind of a natural fit for it because our job as librarians, me, Diane, and Karen, is to provide resources for the campus community. We offer, you know, if you come to us and say, I don't really know how to do this one thing in an online course, we can find resources for you, and resources is broad. We can connect you to someone on campus who might know. We can, you know, if there's a book or an article or a podcast or a YouTube video, things like that, just resources that exist. Our job is to know how to find those things. So we can connect you that way. But a huge part of our job is coordinating the professional development now that is offered on campus. So I am now the chair of the Center for Teaching and Excellence, the CTE committee, and then Karen is the chair of the Staff Association's Professional Development Committee, and then she also comes to our meetings, so we can kind of bridge that because we're offering it for faculty and staff. And then Karen and Diane help coordinate all of the, you know, the emails back and forth and finding speakers and presenters and figuring out what people want on campus too. What are they struggling with, or what new things are they trying that they want to share with everybody else? So it's really just a huge team of people, 2 committees, and then the librarians working to create a schedule each term and to offer these things.
Well, I'll tell you right now that as a faculty member, I think that this professional development is extremely important for several reasons. Number one, a lot of times we get so wrapped up in just getting through each day, especially because we have an accelerated schedule where many of our classes are meeting every single day, and if nothing else, 4 hours per week, even in an online setting. I think sometimes we forget that higher education continues to move forward. New trends are happening all the time. And I think sometimes if we become complacent in how we teach our classes, we're really doing our students a disservice. So even just having the professional development that allows us to see what else is out there or to even just try a few things, I think that in the long run, that makes us much, much better as educators. And so I really appreciate it. And I've gotten some excellent, excellent ideas from previous professional development. And I look forward to that as well. Well, one of the things that the CTE has done, one of the major, at least outward-facing events, is the Faculty Research Colloquium Series that's held on campus each term. Last term, we heard from Megan Ream, and she talked about topics in ethnomathematics, which I'm not a math person, but I found just absolutely fascinating. I didn't even realize there was a study of where numbers came from, and I have to tell you, I walked out of there totally viewing math in such a different way. I thought it was so unique. But I understand that you're going to be letting everybody know who's going to be for the winter term. So do you mind sharing that with us?
Yeah, Professor Paul Miller is our next Faculty Research Colloquium presenter, and we're very excited.
Well, number one, I'm honored. So basically, just to bring everybody in on my topic, I've been accepted into my PhD program at Indiana University of Pennsylvania, and one of the big things in my application was a writing sample. I'd never had anything. I've been writing for years. I've been writing for a decade, but I don't typically write a whole lot of long form stuff. And so a lot of the things that I'd written just weren't going to be acceptable for a writing sample at the PhD level. So I jumped into a topic that I'm very interested in about the social media echo chamber, which certainly come on February 6th. And I can share with you much more about that. But basically, it just talks about how the personalization of the internet has changed how we believe and how we think, and sort of confirms the biases that we already have and the problem with that. So we'll be talking much more about that. But I have to give you a ton of credit, Samantha, for helping me through this process because, again, as we mentioned, editing your own work is next to impossible. And I've also never done anything of that size, and you definitely helped me with the citation as well, which I still owe you lunch. I promise you. So I'm honored to have this opportunity to talk about the things I've been researching in front of my peers and my students. So I'm thankful very much for this opportunity.
We're excited for it. I also think the colloquium is a really good opportunity. Students don't realize that professors do research on their own. So I think it's exciting for them to get to know what their students are thinking about and researching and writing about. And your topic is really relevant too, so that's exciting.
Well, and it's interesting as I'm teaching a media and politics class this term, so I'm going to make my students come to this, although I'm sure I'll talk about it in class otherwise. But, this is something, it's interesting, when I was in the interview, they'd ask me what some of the things that I was interested in researching were, and that was one of them. Another one I'm very interested in researching is the digital divide, which talks a lot about access to technology, especially due to the expense of it. So that was another thing that I hope in the future to do much more research on, but I'll have that opportunity in grad school.
The digital divide is a very librarian topic, too. We
Absolutely.
do a lot of research in that.
Well,
Yeah.
and especially with some of the nonprofits that you work with locally, too, that's got to be something that's discussed about access to technology, because if people don't have proper access to technology, it's very difficult for them to develop skills that are even going to make them successful in a high school or college setting.
Right, not to mention if you don't have access to the internet or a computer or a phone, you can't even apply for a job, write a resume, write a cover letter, apply to college. You don't even have the access to do that or to fill out a FAFSA to get funding. Or
network on LinkedIn. I'm a huge advocate of LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. That's such an important thing. If you don't have the opportunity to make a nice LinkedIn profile to get a professional job, it's almost impossible to find those.
Yeah, not to mention technology and anxiety. Like if you haven't used technology and then you go to college or you go and work somewhere and you've never used technology before, it is easy to spiral in that anxiety, like, oh my gosh, because it is a lot.
I talk to a lot of people a lot of times in my classes. I'm not going to say in all my classes, but in several of my classes, I'll have students either give me their resume or I'll help them write a better resume. And I always still see people saying, oh, I'm very proficient in Microsoft Office. And I'm to the point where I'm telling them to take that off, because that's just an expectation at this point that, maybe 10 years ago, this is something, okay, yes, you know about Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, Excel. Now you have to know this.
It's almost like saying, I know how to read. Like, well, I hope so.
Exactly.
If you're going to apply.
And if you don't have proper access to technology, how are you ever going to be proficient in those, in Word or PowerPoint? But yes, Samantha, I have to tell you, I don't know if you were the one that chose or if it was a panel of people that chose, but I'm honored to be a part of the CTE's Faculty Research Colloquium Series on February the 6th. So we'll hear a lot more about that from me in the future. Well, before we get out of here, Samantha, number one, I want to certainly congratulate you on your published book.
Thank you.
You gave me one. I appreciate it. I read every page. It was very, very wonderful. And if anyone else is interested in the book, I'm going to put the link to on the article. And again, Samantha said that she donates all of the proceeds of this to local nonprofit organizations. Don't forget to vote on the book club by the end of week 3, and you can find more information about that on the Blackboard Library tab, and there's a book club sub-tab. Of course, we'll be all coming to my faculty research colloquium series on February the 6th. So just a couple more things just before we get out of here, Samantha. I know that we talked about this before. I hope that our students, our faculty, and our staff understand what all services the library offers, but can you just, at the beginning of the term, just refresh our memory? What are some of the things that you certainly can help with if anyone comes down to the library?
Yeah, absolutely. So anything that is research related. So if you're writing a paper or you have a presentation and you can't even think of a topic, we can start there with you. And then any kind of research, whether it's finding resources or you don't know how to access our databases, you don't know how to work our databases, even if it's just a Google search and you just can't find what you're looking for, we can help with that. We can help you create citations. There's a lot of overlap between the Learning Center and the library too, but if you come to one of us, we can get you to the right place. Even things like today, I had 2 people come in looking for, where do I get my ID? Come to the library. We'll walk you there and we can show you, especially in week 1 if you're a new student.
But I mean, it's not just that, too. You've got all kinds of books for fun. You've got DVDs. You've got games. There's all kinds of things. There's a quiet place to study. There's meeting areas. I mean, I just hope that students understand how important it is to, if nothing else, be friends with you, because there's going to be a time that comes up where they're going to need help and maybe don't know who to ask. And there's always people every day from 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. in the library. So basically, whenever the library is open, there's a librarian on duty, right?
Yeah, I say this all the time in my classes when I go in and teach. I say, come to the library and don't apologize for bothering us because we get paid to be bothered by you. Like whatever we're doing, our job is to lift our heads, look at you, and answer your question and help you no matter how long it takes. So come bother us. That's what we're here for.
I think you guys should print out a bumper sticker that says that. Come bother us. That's what we're here for. Well, Samantha, thank you very much for taking the time out today. I really appreciate having you on. I'm so congratulatory on your book. I look forward to being a part of the book club. So you guys are doing wonderful things down the library.
Thanks. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Okay, so for Instruction and Reference Librarian Samantha Bise, this is Professor Paul Miller. Stay tuned because we'll be right back with Sandy Box and MaryBeth Fisher from the Education Foundation to talk about this term's scholarship essay contest. We'll be right back.
This is Brant Ellsworth, Assistant Professor of Humanities at Central Penn College. Thank you for listening to the Nightly News Podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to the Nightly News Podcast. This is Professor Paul Miller, and I'm sitting here today with some of my favorite guests that we have down, the wonderful ladies from the Education Foundation. We have Sandy Box and MaryBeth Fisher. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
We're also being joined by Nightly News President Brian Christiana. Brian, it's always a pleasure to have you down.
Thank you, sir, again, for the opportunity.
You're quite welcome. First of all, Sandy, you are the Director of Development for the Central Penn College Education Foundation. MaryBeth, you are in Alumni Relations. You also provide support to the Education Foundation. So we have several things that we want to talk about today. First of all, we want to recap your very successful New York trip with our alumni that happened in December. We're also going to talk about the progress for the Blue Jeans for Scholarships. We're also going to talk about the upcoming scholarship essay contest that will be opening up on February the 4th. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the alumni events that we have planned for 2019. Sound like a plan, everyone?
Sounds
Sure
like
does.
a plan.
All right, well, let's start off at the beginning. Just about a month ago, the Education Foundation and the Alumni Engagement Department reached out to many of our alumni and offered a New York bus trip. It's an annual bus trip. So can you kind of tell us how did that go? Just maybe tease it for a future bus trip for our alumni. Tell us about some of the things that happened on the bus trip.
Well, thank you, Paul. We had a full bus that day. It was fun. We were very blessed with the weather held out right until the end of the day because it did start to rain as we were waiting for our bus to pick us up. So we were lucky. This is an annual trip, as you mentioned, and it has typically been done in December. We're toying around with different dates for 2019.
Well, first of all, I mean, anytime you're scheduling things in December, January, February, it's always subject to weather.
Oh, yeah.
Especially in something like New York, where basically the bus trip, you're dropped off in New York, and then you can do your own thing. But at the same time, if it's cold out, that's going to be a long day.
It's a long afternoon if it's cold out.
Yes.
And it is cold out in December in New York City.
Typically, unless you get really lucky. So what happened?
I know I myself went to see a play. A couple other of our guests saw plays. Several
What'd you
went to
see?
museums. I went to see The Lifespan of a Fact.
Okay.
With Daniel Radcliffe.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I've only ever gotten to see one play on Broadway, and it's one I'll never forget, The Phantom of the Opera.
Ooh, that was a good one.
It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
So it's awesome that you guys get to do this. So what did some of the alumni do?
Some went to museums, Central Park, Christmas shopping,
Nice dinner.
dinners. They met up with family and friends. We had
yes,
a
that's
couple
true.
that
We
met
did.
up with family and friends.
And I think that's an interesting thing, too. I know a lot of people try to do those types of things annually, get together maybe with people who don't live around here, and I think that gives them a wonderful opportunity to do that.
Yes.
Sandy, what kept you busy during the day?
Shopping, and it never fails when you go to New York City that there's always a lot of people there, but it seemed like there were an exceptionally large amount of people there that day. So everything took a little bit longer to accomplish. The St. Patrick's Cathedral, Rockefeller Center, and of course, you did that shopping. But then we got to the point that my daughter and I said to her, okay, I need a good meal, because I had already eaten a hot dog off the vendor. And I said, I need a good meal and a glass of adult beverage. So I milked that for about an hour and a half.
Was it because the day was so nice out, or is it just, do you think it's just that crazy every day?
I think both.
Yeah, and
That
I think
time of the year.
Right, and I think there were some things going on in New York City that weekend that attracted some additional guests. Because I had gone last year and it wasn't quite as crazy busy. But, it was still fun. It's still fun. I kept warm because there were so many people close up against you walking on the sidewalk that you really didn't get chilly.
They don't call it the city that never sleeps for nothing.
That's exactly right.
Well, I'm glad to know that this was another successful opportunity for our alumni to not only do a little bit of networking with some other alumni on the bus, but have a fun day with friends and family in the Big Apple. So look forward to 2019. May or may not be in December.
May not be.
Stay tuned in to when we have Sandy and MaryBeth down again. But it's something annually that the Education Foundation and Alumni Relations does. And certainly if that's something that you're interested in, make sure you keep it on your calendar when that date gets announced. Sandy, there was something that I wanted to talk to you about, one of the major initiatives out of your office, and that is that the Blue Jeans for Scholarships initiative. One of the things that we have the opportunity to do, and this is, I think we're going into our third year now, if I'm not mistaken, that we have an opportunity on Wednesdays to have money withdrawn from our paychecks for the opportunity to have basically a dress down day, to wear jeans. Number one, I think this is extremely successful because when we've talked about this in the past, a vast majority of the faculty and staff take advantage of this. And I specifically make sure I take advantage of it because, again, the money that's coming out of our checks is going directly into scholarships.
Correct.
Can you tell us a little bit about how the drive for 2019 went and maybe where you stand with some of those numbers?
Well, the drive for 2019 went very well, but I'll just give you a little recap. When I started here 7 years ago, we had the payroll deductions for our faculty and our staff, and we had about 10% participation. And then we jumped up to maybe 25, and then I think we actually got up to around 50% until we started the Blue Jeans for Scholarship campaign. And once we initiated that, we saw it jump to about 65. Last year, I think it was around 80. This year, we're right around 75%, which is still extremely successful. To have a company this small, an organization this small, and have that kind of participation is unbelievable. But it is. It's approved by the cabinet. The cabinet approves it every year as to whether or not we're going to do it. But this year we had 140 full-time and permanent part-time faculty and staff. And out of those 140, 106 people participated.
That's incredible.
It is incredible.
And you know what? To me, that says something about the quality and the types of character that we have the individuals working here to take money out of their paychecks. And again, it's not like we're giving hundreds of dollars out out of every paycheck, though I'm sure some are. It's just that fact that we are willing to take money directly out of our paychecks. And I mean, to be honest, I like wearing jeans every once in a while, but I also don't mind dressing up. To me, it's all about giving that money to the scholarship.
It is, and it's very important. I mean, the blue jeans is just like it's
bonus.
icing on the cake. I mean, that is really what it is. That's not why we do the annual campaign. Of course, we do the annual campaign to raise scholarship dollars for our students. But the other thing is, this is like a two-part. Faculty and staff participate. They get to wear blue jeans. I get to take that information to say, when I'm preparing a proposal to ask for a grant from another organization, from a community organization, from a foundation, I get to use that information and say to them, 75% of our employees support and participate in what we do. That's huge. That's huge to be able to tell a prospective donor that not only do we walk the walk and we talk the talk, we do it all. So when we say this is what we're going to do, not only do we talk about it, but we actually have people participate. That's huge. I mean, it really is. When I talk to other people and they ask about our employee appeal, and I tell them, they're shocked. They're shocked. I mean, I came from another organization, and now much larger organization, but still less than 10% of our faculty and staff participated.
That's incredible. Brian, let me ask you a question. As a student, what does it mean to you to hear something like that 75% of our faculty and staff take money directly out of their paychecks each and every time we get a paycheck to go into scholarship funds?
I think that's really great that we have faculty and staff that really care about you. It shows that they're trying to make an initiative and trying to also give success to their students. I'm very thankful for all of our faculty and staff here at Central Penn Colleges. They're really doing a good job in the academic setting, and then just everywhere, in particular in the office, just everywhere. I'm very thankful.
Well, that's fantastic, and I'm just curious about what students think about that, because I'm sure that the students see us in our jeans and wonder why they're wearing jeans today, and I'm always very sure to let them know why we are wearing jeans on Wednesdays, for sure.
Well, yeah, when we see you wear the jeans, we're like, thank you. Honestly, we think to ourselves like that's pretty cool that they give back.
Right.
Well, I'm glad that you noticed that. That'll lead us right in, Sandy, to talking about one of the main reasons that we have you down. Although, to be honest, I would like to do a podcast with you guys every single week, because it's always a blast to have you guys down here. Twice a year, the Education Foundation has an essay contest. So we're going to be talking about the winter term. You did things a little bit differently this year. Usually it opens up right when we come back for school. This time it's a little different. The Education Foundation Scholarship Essay will be open starting February 4th and will close on March 1st. Starting February 4th, you can go to foundation.centralpenn.edu for the application.
Correct.
So, Sandy, the first question is, why did you decide to push it back from early January to early February?
Well, what we wanted to do is we found that with students just coming back, starting the term, we felt we were putting a little bit too much pressure on them. They had so many other things to get ready, just the first 2 weeks of class, trying to get back in the rhythm of things.
Especially after the holiday.
Right, especially after the holiday. And so what we were finding is that we were getting very little submission the first 3 weeks that the scholarship application process is open, and then the last week we were getting slammed. So then that told us maybe our timing was wrong. And it also makes it a little bit more difficult when we get that volume of scholarships at one time. It makes it a little bit more difficult on our reviewers. So in order to accommodate our students, in order to accommodate our reviewers, and hopefully take a little stress off the students, that they have the opportunity to actually write their essay, have it reviewed, give it some thought before they hit the submit button. We're hoping that will improve the quality of the essays that we receive and improve the quality of the chances of the students being selected for a scholarship.
So, Sandy, you bring up an important point here, and I want to go to Brian. Brian obviously is not only, and I think you won't mind me saying this, not only have you received money from these essays, you've also helped people being in the Learning Center review. So, Sandy, I want to go back to a point that you just made. Writing, then reviewing, then submitting.
That is correct.
I think, unfortunately, a lot of students they see that it's only a couple of hundred words. Right. They're thinking, I can knock this out. I'm just going to hit submit. That's one less thing I have to worry about. But these are evaluated. So the students, it depends on several factors, and we're not going to talk about all those right now. But the number 1 and 2 factors are your GPA and what score you get on your essay. By that rationale, Brian, can you, being that you've won for one of these essay contests several times. Can you just give a couple of tips on what a new student or someone who hasn't done this before, how they might go about filling out this scholarship essay?
Well, this is what I tell everyone in the Learning Center. Whenever I'm writing about something, I put it in like personal, like something personal, and then it just branches off. Literally, I can go from one subject here to another thing there. And it's great that people started coming to the Learning Center for the essays. Personally, my biggest accomplishment was a student. He asked for me to look over it, and he ended up winning a good amount of money. So that was honestly a big, put a big smile on my face. So I was very appreciative for Craig coming in.
So Brian, you're in the Learning Center. Do you mind sharing what your schedule is for this term in case anybody wants to come up and talk to you if they have more questions, or maybe have you review their essay?
Yeah, I'm in there Wednesday and Thursday. Wednesday, I'm there 1 to 2. Thursday, 12 to 1.
Okay.
Yes.
So not only can they come up and see you, they can certainly see any of the fine people that are working in the Learning Center. But to be honest, if you want tips, not only from myself, but from Brian, please take the time not only to do it, but to have it reviewed by somebody. Right. I will even, you can email me, paulmiller@centralpenn.edu. I will even look it over, or I will put you in touch with Brian, because I think so many people just kind of overlook that whole review part.
It's even interesting, you don't even have to be embarrassed to come up. I even get mine, like Jamie and I, we exchange and we look at each other just to make sure it's presentable and it's good for the viewers.
It is funny that they students do overlook the review process, and the only reason I say that is because we'll see someone who scored very low on the evaluation, and yet their GPA is extremely high. So it doesn't make any sense. What makes sense is they were in a hurry. They wrote it. They hit submit. And they didn't really think it through. They didn't answer the question. They look at grammar. They look at whether you answered the question. They look at a lot of things. But if you are supposed to have a 3.5 and you submit a piece of sloppy work,
well, if you have a 3.5, write like you have a 3.5.
Exactly.
Correct.
Exactly. Right. So.
Okay, so Sandy, the question that's on everybody's mind is, what is the question for this term's Foundation Essay Contest?
Well, we always try to make these questions something that everyone can answer. We're not trying to set people up for failure. So here's the question. How has the neighborhood you've grown up in molded you into the person you are today?
Oh, that's a good one. That's easy. I'm serious.
Right.
Honestly, that's easy.
Well, just, Brian, off the top of your head, can you just maybe walk yourself through the thought process of how you might go about starting this based on that question?
Oh, it's going to start as a kid. Honestly, I'll start off going through education, elementary, high school, going to a private school, and then going through a different area it's more of a poor area. So you got to think about the different people there and all the different problems that have, and how you develop from there.
Right.
So just right there alone, off the top of Brian's head, he developed a wonderful way to start off this.
Right.
One of the reasons I wanted to have you down, Sandy, is because I did want, even though it doesn't open until February 4th, I did still want listeners to the podcast to have the opportunity to kind of stew on this for a little bit. Because that kind of question, while it might be easier for Brian, might not be easy to answer for everybody, and you might have to kind of connect the dots there. So I think that's an extremely unique question. Where do you come up with these questions?
I go, the funny thing is I'll go out and I'll do some research and just see what people are asking. It's out there. And then I just come up with the top 2 or 3 that I think will answer the question of the evaluators. Because the evaluators are looking for something. They have to evaluate these essays and these students without ever seeing them, without ever talking to them. So I try to come up with questions that will give a little bit of depth to the character that's writing the essay. I just wing it sometimes, but I do send it out to the committee. I do send it out to my committee and say, okay, what do you think? Give me your, and I do rankings.
Again, February 4th it opens. You can go to foundation.centralpenn.edu. It'll close up on March 1st. Right.
Sandy, is the Stabler scholarship still an option?
Yes, the Stabler, just to give people, thank you, Brian, for bringing that up.
Yes, of course.
The Stabler Foundation it's an extra box that you click when you're submitting your essay to be considered for the Stabler Foundation. Now, the Stabler Foundation is a little different. It's still the same process we go through, but Stabler recipient must have a GPA of 3.0 or higher, and they must click the box to say that they are morally obligated to pay back their scholarship.
Yep.
Not financially obligated, not legally obligated, but morally obligated, which just gives you a little bit more thought
Giving back to the
giving
school.
back to the
Yeah.
school. So, one of the things that I have to do annually with regard to the Stabler
Yeah.
Foundation is I have to send out letters to everyone who received the Stabler Foundation while they were here and ask them to consider repaying. Stabler Foundation has given us a lot of money, and we have awarded well over, I'm going to say, $150,000 just from the Stabler Foundation
That's
in the years
incredible.
of it. Right. Leads me back into the thank you note, which is a requirement.
That's You're born like when you ever receive something, you're always told just send a thank you letter.
So what Sandy's referring to is anyone who receives an Education Foundation scholarship is required to submit a thank you note
Correct.
to whichever specific donor, because basically what happens is there are hundreds of different scholarships, would you say?
Yes, there are over 100 different scholarships
So,
that we have within the foundation.
Over
right.
100 scholarships. So what we kind of do, and I'm just kind of letting you behind the curtain just a tiny bit because I don't want to give too much away because Sandy will have my behind. Basically, we're in that meeting and we kind of figure out who's going to get, and then Sandy takes that information and kind of matches the individual winners with the individual scholarships
Yes.
that they would be available to have. So,
Right.
Sandy, I got to give you a ton of credit. You do such a wonderful job
Thank
with
you.
the scholarships. Again, we encourage you so much. February 4th, mark that on your calendar. March 1st, it closes. One final question I had for you about the scholarship, Sandy. Do you remember how many applicants that we had over the summer, which is the last time we did this?
I want to say that we had like 167. I think we had 167. And out of those, if I'm not mistaken, we had 33 that were first-term students. So, again, brings me back to another thing. First-term students, even though they don't have a GPA, they should apply. They should put in what they think their GPA is at that point in time. We verify everything anyway, but at least for them to be considered. And then what I do is I hold those applications until their grades have been posted, and then we reevaluate and are able to distribute some more funds through that. But we had 160, I want to say 167, and I think I was able to award 124 scholarships.
That's incredible. That's
Yes.
like a 75% rate.
It was huge.
Wow.
It's huge.
So again, it's not to say that everyone who applies is going to win, but
No.
at a 75% rate, the last time we did it, your chances are pretty
Your
darn
odds
good.
are pretty good, right, exactly.
Especially if you take Brian up on his
On his essay help.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, I remember the email I received. I even remember where I was at. I was at the Hershey Park Stadium. I don't remember what. I was working some show, and I remember getting that email, and I was like, "All right, this day's getting even better."
Well, it means a lot because students don't have to pay this money back.
Exactly,
It's
yeah.
that much less money you have to spend on loans and
Right.
paying it back going forward. So,
Yeah.
to everyone who's ever received 1 cent from the Education Foundation,
Thank you.
Yes, I will thank you for them.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Before we get out of here on today's podcast, I did want to come back to MaryBeth because MaryBeth has a full calendar of alumni events that are planned for 2019. So can you share some of those dates, MaryBeth, with the listeners?
Oh, I'll be happy to, Paul. On March 15th, we're starting there, our first ever Hershey Bears hockey game.
Whoa!
Yes.
They do a really nice job over there as well for groups.
Yes, and we're very excited with that. It's the first time, as I said, we're going to try a hockey game. So tickets will be on sale, I would say probably starting this week. And we do have limited numbers of tickets because it is the first year. So we're hoping this will take off. Then in April, we have our annual Easter Bunny Breakfast. This year, we are going to make it more of a little lunch. And that will be on Saturday, April 13th. And that will give you enough time to come with your children, meet the Easter Bunny, do pictures, have a little something to eat, and do a craft. And that craft, then you could leave and go right to the East Pennsboro Township Easter egg hunt.
I like how
And-
you do that on the same day as well. Make a whole day out of it.
Right. Just you're in and out.
Very smart.
We're calling it the Easter Bunny Hop because you will hop into
Yeah.
Central Penn College, have lunch, meet the bunny, and then hop on over to the Easter egg hunt. Then on June 1st, another first, we are doing our first annual bowling. We're doing a bowling at ABC West for the alumni.
I don't know if you all are aware, But if we would ever get a bowling team here at Central Penn College, you know that I would be your ringer, right?
Oh, no, we did not know
Because
that.
I carry about a 200 average.
Whoa.
So, and actually what's funny is I've actually bowled at ABC West for about 30 years. I started when I was 8. I bowled till I went to college, and then basically after college, I got out of it for a lot of different reasons. But I just started back up in the league 2 years ago, and I'm now better than I ever had been without bowling in a league for like 16 years. So I will, so long as I'm free that day, I will be there, and I'll show you guys how it's done.
All right.
Saturday, June 1st. And as Paul is mentioning, he will be there. This is always open to alumni and faculty and staff.
Right.
All of our alumni events are not exclusive to alumni. So your family, your friends, alumni, and staff.
I love coming along to alumni events because
faculty.
I've been here long enough now. I've been here almost 6 years. That now some of the people that I had in those classes, those first couple terms I was here, are now graduating and now getting involved in the alumni events. So I always enjoy it, and I get a chance to network as well with some of the students.
Then in July, we're again returning to the Harrisburg Senators for a baseball game on July 19th. That's an annual event, and that always sells out too. August 16th. August 16th is the Education Foundation Golf Open.
And I will already be putting that on my calendar.
Okay, sounds good.
I got to go for the first time last year,
Yes.
and I got to say, you both did an immaculate job with everything. Everything was wonderful. The food was great.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful day.
It was a little hot.
Well, what do you want
It
in the
was-
middle of July?
It was either hot or rain.
That's
so
right.
we chose hot.
That's right. We'll take it.
Then October 19th is homecoming.
Oh,
Yes,
yes,
October
yes.
19th. Mark your calendars. So that will be the fall festival up on campus. And then on the lower level, outside of the Night and Day Cafe, the alumni will again have their alumni tent and reunion.
I'll lose my throne that day.
Yes, you will, King.
Ah.
And then there are a couple other events that I'm not able to speak of yet that have not been confirmed.
We're already into October, so I think that's pretty
Yeah.
We're okay.
I do know before we get out of here that Sandy had mentioned that there was one more event that she wanted to specifically talk about. So, Sandy,
Yes,
you're up.
I do. February the 20th, we are holding, we being the college and the Education Foundation, are co-sponsoring a West Shore Chamber mixer. Now, this mixer will be open to not only West Shore Chamber members, alumni, faculty, staff, but we'll also be inviting some community members, some of our donors, and our boards. The purpose for this mixer is to get more people back on campus, see what we do, see what we're all about, remind them again that we're here. We're going to take the opportunity to have tables set up so that when people can find some information out about the continuing education classes, the different degrees that we offer here, they'll learn about the community outreach that Curtis Volker's doing with regard to the community businesses and partnering with them to have students come here and they get scholarships. And then the other thing that we'll be doing is the Culinart, which is our new
Food service.
They're great. They
food
are
service
great.
on campus, is going to take the opportunity to showcase their talents. So we're going to have some little settings set up that like a boardroom, wedding facility, so that people can get an idea as to what all Culinart has to offer and what all Central Penn College has to offer. Other than education, we have many other things to offer here on campus. So it's just going to be a good evening. It's from 5 to 7. You'll see some things coming out on the webpage, social media. There'll be some invitations going out. So, if you see anything, if you see it and you're interested, follow the registration information and go through and come on in. It's a party.
I would also like to let be known we have 6 new alumni council members
Yes.
who are starting this week. So we're very thrilled to have 6 more alumni come back and assist in emphasizing all that Central Penn has done for them, is continuing to do, and will do in the future.
Fantastic. Thank you both very much for coming down today and sharing everything that we have going on. Just a quick recap. Obviously, we started off by talking about the New York trip, and MaryBeth shared several dates that I will accompany this podcast in the written article, and I'll give you some links that you'll be able to follow to keep up with how to register for some of these events. Also, the Education Foundation Scholarship Essay Contest will open up on February 4th, close on March 1st. And for that application, you can go to foundation.centralpenn.edu. Mr. Christiana has also offered his services to look over some of those scholarship essays in the Learning Center. And of course, you can go to the Learning Center anytime and get some help there. We also talked about several events coming up. So save the date for some of those events. Again, I will put those along with what we have going on. And of course, Sandy, I think it's wonderful that 75% of our faculty and staff participate in this paycheck deduction for the opportunity not only to wear jeans, but to pay it forward to our students.
We are very fortunate at Central Penn to have such caring and truly caring faculty and staff. They care about each other, and they care about our students, and they care about the well-being of Central Penn College. It's a fantastic thing.
Couldn't have said it better myself. All right, well, thank you very much, everybody, for joining us today on the Nightly News Podcast. So we're going to get out of here for another edition. I would like to first thank President of the Nightly News Media Club, Brian Christiana. Brian, thank you for being here.
Thank you, sir, again, for everything.
Of course, the Director of Development for the Central Penn College Education Foundation, Sandy Box. Sandy, always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure for me, too.
And MaryBeth Fisher from Alumni Relations and the Central Penn College Foundation Support. MaryBeth, thank you for being here.
You are so welcome.
All right. And I am Professor Paul Miller, and we will catch you next time on the Nightly News Podcast.